our first out of industry interview with Jeff Bladt of DoSomething.org. He is the chief data scientist over there, and he takes us through his bona fides of how he looks at data, what he's learning from data, and what even maybe you can learn from data. Jeff Bladt. Okay, so we have Jeff Bladt here, Chief Data Scientist is what you are. DoSomething.org, among other institutions that are housed in the same office, right?
Correct.
So what else am I missing?
So we've spun off an in-house agency, TMI,
Right.
Teens or Tech, Millennials, and Impact. So advising companies on how to do one of those three things, multiples of those things.
Yeah.
And then Crisis Text Line, which is the first text-based service that replicates what help or suicide prevention line would be.
Okay, but through text.
But through text, all through text.
Because your target market is?
We're the largest organization for 13 to 25-year-olds. In the United States, definitely, we think the world. We have 4 million members. So that's more than the Boy Scouts, more than the Girl Scouts, almost more than the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts combined.
Oh, wow. No cookies, though.
No cookies.
All right. Unless actually in the data you have some cookies, I would imagine.
We also have a no cookie policy on our data, so we're progressive in that way as well.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay, good and healthy, and so that's also positive. But DoSomething.org, the original, tell us about that just so we know.
So, as I was saying, Do Something is the largest organization for young people in social change. So we offer young people using tech the ability to take action on anything they care about. And we structure those actions into what we call campaigns. So a campaign could be as simple as clean up the local park in your neighborhood. And the way they discover those and the way we get them, we use technology. So the primary way or the best way is through text. Mm-hmm. You read 99% of the text messages you receive. So out of that 4 million, we have a daily texting relationship with 2.6 million of those young people. And the rest and some of the overlap we reach through social media and through email as well.
2.6 million a day.
That we have an active going conversation with, yeah.
That's amazing. And you are the chief data scientist. And so what is your role?
So, it's a little bit of everything. We're talking about the text messages there. If you have 2.6 million people replying to something you send out, you need a machine to answer the overwhelming majority of those. So at the simplest level, we use data and technology to make sure that those people have a good experience. It's not just we send the message out and the conversation ends. It really is conversational. So, hey, are you interested in helping homeless people in your neighborhood? You text back anything, we have a response. Oh, great. Have you thought about doing this campaign where you collect jeans and drop them off at your mall? They text anything. Great. Here's the address of your local mall. And all of that's handled by a machine. Mm-hmm. So we have that end. And then at the broader, we have 250 of these campaigns. So
a year
mm-hmm. at a time. So mm-hmm. right now there's 250 opportunities for young people to take action on.
Amazing.
It's great. And it wasn't always the case. When I started, we did 12. So we've been scaling up.
Okay.
And to get to that scale, you need data. And then having 250 means you have whole new types of data. You can find out what works. Mm-hmm. So we can find out that we have a campaign around kickball and using that to make more inclusive spaces in schools. And that campaign is the campaign that guys, our male membership, like the most. So we'd be able to use that lesson and then make more campaigns in that vein to reach more young males, for instance. So,
interesting. So learn from the males to do more, male project.
Exactly. And what was it about the language or the incentives there? So we use it to find bright spots.
Excellent. All right. So we're going to get even deeper into what you're talking about there down the line here, because first, as we do, who you are informs what you do. So we need to find out about you. We're absolutely going to cover your thoughts on what young people are thinking around cannabis and how they're acting around cannabis. You are the first non-cannabis guest that we've had, and so we're very excited about that. Data being a huge issue, we're starting to do now issues. So data is an issue for everyone, even those in cannabis, right?
Absolutely. What is it that Bloomberg likes to say? In God we trust, everyone else bring data.
That's a great quote.
It is. I wish it was mine.
It's from the organization or from the former mayor?
From the former mayor.
Oh, himself. Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. So Jeff Bladt is from
I grew up in Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Okay. And so then if I am paying attention on those A's, there is that Michigander type of accent, just slightly, but it's there.
It is absolutely there.
So Kalamazoo. And so what is it like in Kalamazoo?
Kalamazoo is, if you're familiar with the Midwest, I would say Ann Arbor light.
Uh-huh.
It's a university town. We have Western Michigan, you have Kalamazoo College, you have Kalamazoo Community College. So we have a lot of students, but it's not the marquee university town. So there's some of that sort of university town atmosphere. And we're also the exact midpoint between Detroit and Chicago.
Oh.
So 2.5 hours either direction gets you to a city.
I gotcha. And so as far as Detroit or Chicago, which sports teams did you support, if any?
I grew up following Chicago sports. My father grew up in Chicago. My grandmother grew up in Chicago, grandparents. So we were a Chicago-oriented family.
And so Cubs, I would imagine?
Cubs in the National League. I'll still root for the Sox in the other league. Yeah.
Okay. So you appreciate Chicago.
I love Chicago. I was there when Steve Bartman botched that World Series bid.
That's so interesting. I just spoke to another. You were at the game?
Yeah, I was at that game.
I just spoke to another person that was at that very game. It actually was Mark Passerini, I believe.
Okay.
We will be interviewing soon from Ohm Medical. He has a dispensary in both Michigan and Illinois.
Got it. Yeah, no, it was probably the most depressing moment of my life.
Yeah. The Cubs are cursed. They have the Billy Goat curse. Is this? And we actually, just to tie it all together, we just spoke to Jamie Lewis from Mountain Medicine, whose logo is a billy goat. So there you go. There's data for you, right? So that said, you were also a Bulls fan, so I don't have to feel bad for you in terms of sports.
No, I had a good childhood.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So you had a good childhood. How does a little person become a data scientist? So, like, what were you like as a kid? What were you into?
I mean, I actually played pretty much every sport they'd get in front of me.
Right.
And if you fast forward, the first time I ever started doing what I would call data at scale was to manage my fantasy baseball team.
Okay.
So sports was actually probably my hook in today. I also ran the books for our March Madness tournaments when I was 13, 14 for my group of friends and later my entire school. So
right.
Definitely like a gambling sports angle in.
That was the ticket in.
Get
more into that in terms of like set up your earliest Final Four bracket. How did it all come together?
Gosh, I mean, I was in the 7th grade, and at that point you're using a photocopier. This is the 90s, so photocopied out everything. Had set up all the dynamics for how you structure the winning pot, the pool, scoring all the rounds. Had run simulations to make sure it's fair. I'm sure this was a solved problem. I decided to solve it from scratch. It was nothing. I think I was collecting $2 a bracket.
Sure.
And I remember being called into our principal's office. And I'm thinking, now the shit's hit the fan, Totally. And he had just filled out a bracket and it was trying to, pass me $2 so he could be in on the action. So,
so he noticed your talent. He saw this as a legitimate enterprise.
Yes.
Despite the gambling.
Despite
component.
the gambling, yes.
Right.
So I probably one of the rare. I actually really enjoyed middle school and high school. Like I look at the data now and I understand how traumatic and impactful those years can be. For myself, I had a good time.
Okay.
Yeah.
You obviously were proficient, so you were a good student, I would imagine, right?
I was that student where you'd get on the report card. I wish we had a whole classrooms of Jeff
full
Blatt.
of Jeffrey, right? Yeah.
It's a little sycophantic in hindsight.
Sure. Which is even more interesting, right? But then you also had the sports angle, so you were able to socialize as well, I would imagine.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
I'm just trying to identify why.
I was on. I played on the up to the varsity basketball team.
Right.
So basketball was my sport.
So it wasn't just the pointy head. It was also, there were many aspects to Blattdom back in the day.
Yes. Yeah. You could say that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. That said, you went to, I believe, Chicago, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then this is just for smart people, right? You know that.
Well, I mean, I look at the acceptance rate now and the acceptance rate when I got in, and I'm convinced I wouldn't get in now.
Okay.
College was much easier to get into before the Common App. So
okay. And we spoke to Scott Greiper, who also went to Chicago, not at the same time as you, even earlier. So it was probably even easier for him to get in.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Did you always know that you wanted to go to Chicago, or when did that come upon you?
It was my first choice for schools. Actually, my grandparents had gone to University
Okay.
of Chicago as well, so I had a connection there.
Okay.
My grandmother was there in the 30s, so right when they were doing the Manhattan Project. So
That's amazing.
it was amazing. So while Enrico Fermi was building a bomb, she was actually the person babysitting his kids,
Literally?
literally babysitting his kids. So I've always had this like strange relationship with the university. I like the sort of nerdy aspects to it. For me, those are all positives.
Oh, sure. And also the history of it.
Yeah,
That's remarkable that your grandmother babysat those children. That's ridiculous.
and at the time she had no idea why.
Right.
It was just visiting faculty. So
Why did these kids need me to take care of them? Oh, because of the A-bomb.
correct. Yeah.
Does she, in retrospect, put stuff together, or was she able to kind of piece it together for herself? And how quickly was she able to piece it together, if so?
I mean, definitely after the details of the Manhattan Project came out, sort of at the end of the war, after the Trinity Project, after we dropped the bomb, absolutely, they understood what was going on right away.
Right. Not necessarily before that, though.
They understood it was like government research. They weren't but they didn't know it was at all, building a pile reactor under the bleachers.
And I guess how could they have, right?
Correct.
I mean, this science was unimaginable.
Yeah.
So there you have it. So we'll talk to her maybe if she's still around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about your folks though? What were your folks into? What kind of people are they or were they?
So my grandmother went on to be a professor. So my father is the product of like having a professor for a parent.
Right. What does that mean?
What does that mean? So he's very bookish. My father. Yeah, and same for my mother. I'm guessing this is why they got along. My mother has a very big heart. She works in the not-for-profit space with underprivileged children. She came out of a military family, so all my grandparents were that Great War generation, and I think that just passed through my parents.
Right.
So, and that's I came up with probably, looking back, would be a very normal Midwest, quasi-suburban, more or less middle class.
Right. With the saint of a mother to boot, right?
Yes.
And any brothers or sisters?
I have one older sister.
Okay, what is she into?
She is in Africa right now, saving the world.
Aha.
There's how she would put it. Yeah, no, she works for buildon.org. So she spends 50% of her time in developing countries and then 50% of her time in inner city Detroit.
Amazing.
And you can take your pick, which is harder. So
Right. Well, I would imagine. I mean, what is her take on Detroit? Is the regentrification that I'm sold actually happening, or what's the deal? Because I also know the city's bankrupt, right?
yeah, that I can attest to. The city is bankrupt. Just based on anecdote from visiting, there are gentrified pockets, but they're small.
Got it.
You're talking blocks.
Okay. So it's happening, but
It's happening. Yeah,
slowly
and
it's smallly.
yeah.
All right. So University of Chicago, you get there. When did you realize that everyone was at least as smart as you?
Oh, orientation before orientation.
Was that surprising? Because I've spoken to other smart people, if you will, or folks that go to institutions like that, and it is somewhat usually of epiphany that I'm not necessarily the definitely the smartest person or among the top 1%. I now see all of these very smart people. It's a thing, right?
I didn't go to what would be I went to a good high school, not a competitive high school.
Okay.
So
Right.
I won the ovarian lottery and was gifted in like math. So
Sure.
it was easy at
Right.
high school. And then you get to a university where everyone won the ovarian lottery.
Right.
And all of a sudden showing up's not enough. So that came as a rude awakening, especially when you have professors grading on strict curves,
Right.
Average becomes a C, whereas middle American high school averages a B plus or something.
And were you surprised by grades, or how did you acclimate to the situation?
There was definitely a learning curve, and there's some transcripts in there that are very much a hodgepodge of letters when I first started. It's an adjustment, and you could tell the kids that went to competitive high schools. And I do think they came in with the education prepares you for an advantage.
Right. So not necessarily. I wish I had a whole classroom of Jeffs to begin with.
No, I mean, I was happy. I really enjoyed the, media and quality of the other students.
Right.
The conversations were fantastic.
Right.
The speed a professor could go was great.
Uh-huh.
I'd much rather be playing catch up than bored. So,
Good. Okay. And then when did you happen upon a major?
uh, like probably half the students, I had the idea that I would want a degree in economics. And so that part stuck with me. And then I moved into policy because I also went on and got a master's in public policy from University of Chicago.
Okay.
So policy caught my attention because it's economics, but in practice. So I really like that intersect between that sort of skill set of using data and modeling and evidence, but applying it to real world problems. So that's what got me most interested. So it was maybe a 3-4 year evolution to that point.
Okay. And in terms of economics, you had known that before you went, or when did that decision get to you?
I knew economics once I knew I was going to Chicago would be
what we were going to do.
That's what we were going to do. I at some points I entertained studying history. So if anything else, it would have been like econ and history.
And before you happened upon policy, what was it that was interesting to you in terms of econ?
It'll sound corny, but I really like the way it makes you think. So very rigorous economics is more, it's sort of like the wise ass discipline. Because you go, that works, but you don't understand why it works. So we're going to have to figure it out. So all of that sort of, all that stuff in Freakonomics, all of that sort of counterintuitive thinking, that really jazzed me up as a young man.
So that is how econ folks think in, school, in higher learning.
Exactly. And I think especially at Chicago, like there's sort of this, we'll be the smartest people in the room and figure something out, and everyone else is sort of blind to it.
Right.
And that's really appealing when you're 18 years old.
Sure.
Yeah, it still is appealing. Yeah.
Right. It's something to chase, certainly.
Yes.
So did you, as far as the personalities of the professors, it was appealing to, subject matter was appealing to you. How did you, adjust to what these folks were, or how these folks were educating you?
Oh boy, So Chicago is both benefited and cursed by the quality of their econ faculty. So you have, I learned basic micro and macro or microeconomics from Stephen Levitt.
Okay.
It's a fantastic.
Speaking of
he actually has, he's a fabulous lecturer. So that's a win-win.
Yeah.
But I also took classes from Robert Lucas. He has a Nobel, award in the field.
Sure.
He is not what I would call a fantastic lecturer. At least he didn't click with me as a student.
Got it.
So he could go up there on the board and derive something from thin air, but as a student, you had no idea what was going on.
Right.
So, it comes with both sides. So like it's the strength of the department because they publish, like it's no one's business. But as, 18, 19-year-olds, that's not necessarily the best thing for your education.
Interesting. So I've got the Nobel Prize winner, but I can't necessarily do anything with it.
Exactly.
All right. So this is where we are. And then as far as you must have been one of the best athletes at Chicago. Did you play any sports? Are there any sports? Is there a way to play sports at that school?
We have intramural sports. We have D3 sports. The university itself, I believe, sold its Big Ten membership to Michigan State. So back when there was actually just 10 teams. So Michigan State got in. Chicago pieced out, bulldozed the football field and built a library there. And then now we have D3 sports that no one goes to.
Interesting. And that's a different type of take on the Joni Mitchell paved paradise and put up a parking lot. It's kind of the other way around as far as Chicagoans would be, would look at it.
Absolutely.
Paved over the football field and put up a library, literally. But now what do they do with that edifice now, though? I mean, if we're all digital, what do we do with libraries now?
Personally, I prefer the physical copy. So for me,
you are over 30, right?
I am 30. So
okay.
Yes,
all right.
Over 30. There is research out there that talks about how you remember things better if you read it in print as compared to like read it on a Kindle or on a screen. And part of it's for some people how they remember is the location within a book. So for me, if I'm reading a book and there's a really interesting fact, mentally I'm going, oh, it's about 20% in top left. And those added pieces of metadata actually make it a stickier fact.
My brain works the same way, at least as far as that specific thing you were just talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And it turns out that matters. So like if you recently had Kindle, you have none of that. It's just like I remember it was on the screen, and then your mind loses it because it can't figure out where you remembered it.
That's an interesting point. And one to continue thinking about, I think, but not necessarily right now. We've got to get to the next step. So now you just did say you are exactly 30, so there isn't a ton of work experience. But when you did happen upon policy, when did that become apparent to you?
So I did my last year of undergraduate and my first year of graduate school congruently. So really, that was the crucible of it all. So back half of my college education really took to policy memos, using it for any number of issues.
Right. The crucible of it all having nothing to do with Arthur Miller, of course.
Nothing.
Right. Yeah. Different thing. It's Chicago, not Salem.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, so you overlapped, and so you were even an overachiever in Chicago.
Only in scheduling.
Okay, fair enough. And so how much work was that to accomplish that, at least in the one overlap year?
It was a full course load. It was a full course. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you come out with policy, and then as you're getting your master's, did you have a thought as to what you wanted to do specifically?
I always thought I would end up back in a PhD program. But I also, after doing it for 5 straight years, was ready not to do that as the next thing.
Got it.
I took an internship at a sovereign wealth fund in Central Asia. So I thought finance might be an interesting application. That was not the right application for me.
How come?
It could have been location. Kazakhstan's not, the most interesting place if you're 23, 22 years old and single.
Yeah.
Some people might like that. It wasn't for me. And just the finance in general, the problems were the same problems over and over again. How do you maximize return, yada, yada, yada. Really interesting problems, just not for me.
Interesting. So a finite set of potential solutions was the issue.
Everything led back to return.
Profit.
Yes, at least the group I was working in, yeah.
Well, sure. Well, it should.
And they were interesting. I almost went to Afghanistan as a result of this. So it was interesting work.
Right.
Just not what I wanted to spend a long time doing.
All right. So you were in Kazakhstan, and you are doing this finance work, and you say to yourself, not only do I not like the finance work, but I am, for again, like you said, a 23-year-old, I'm in the middle of nowhere as far as I'm concerned. And so then you came back to the States.
Came back here. And then the first more career-focused job, I took a job doing orchestra data. So I've always, as an interest, really liked classical music, symphonics especially. So I took a job doing orchestral research at the League of American Orchestras in 2008?
Sure.
2008.
Yeah.
Don't fact check that. So really interesting time. They had just brought in a former executive from McKinsey to run a research group at sort of the national level, and I was working under him.
Perfect.
So yeah, it was a huge set of data. No one had really looked at it, and I got to be in there. So it was a really great opportunity. And
so do you call that unlooked at data? Is that virgin data? What do you call that?
Virgin data. Let's coin the term.
Sure.
Yeah.
And was it data about the music? What kind of data were you looking at?
So they had data going back through the Second World War on who played what when, who was in the audience, for probably at various points the 50 largest orchestras, and then currently probably the 600 largest orchestras in the United States.
Wow.
And they also have all their budgets. So they have how they're spending money, down to like how much they're spending money on piano tuning. So data, and they have a huge variety of data that you could all relate to each other, which makes it interesting.
That's amazing. That much historical data and that much specificity. What was the goal? If there was a primary goal, what was it?
The ideal goal would be to right the ship. Obviously, you can't open an art section and not read that the arts are suffering, classical music in particular.
Right.
And so like the meta goal was to find insights within there that could help right the ship. Who's doing it right? What can we learn from them? Also more just pure research, or reporting needs. So orchestras could learn from their peers, understand what's happening to them.
Mm-hmm. Spend 20% on less on piano tuning, please.
Exactly.
But what was what did you find?
I think one of the more interesting things is the number one determining factor for who goes to a concert is not who's playing, not where it is, it's the weather. So, and it makes sense once you work it backwards. So you have primarily 50 plus people going and filling the concert hall.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's raining, they're much less likely to drive or wanting to walk from a parking facility to the concert hall. So they just don't show up. And that's the most salient thing.
That is, it is all ruled by weather, and that is the only thing we can do nothing about.
Exactly. But you see these, there's 1 year where they reported that national symphonic attendance was down some like noticeable percent, like 5%. And like up there, here it is, we're going off the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And then it bounced back the year after, and there's just this blip. And you dig into it and you realize that just happened to be the year it rained in Boston, D.C., and New York on the 4th of July. They canceled those 3 performances where they play, the overture and the fireworks go off. And that right there accounted for 5% or something of all national symphonic attendance for the year.
Wow.
Because you have 500,000 people in Central Park, you play, and then they've heard it.
Sure.
And so they thought it was a trend that's just noise.
Yeah. Okay. So that is the type of thing that you found there. Anything else? Any other learnings that you came away with?
So from I learned that I never wanted to work at another not-for-profit again.
Why?
So bureaucratically, there's so many stakeholders I discovered, and this is an organization, and we had data going back to the 40s, an organization that's been around. You have a lot of stakeholders. That means there's a lot of people that things have to get approved by, from large orchestras, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you'd have a big insight, the first thing you want is to get it to everyone because it's most useful right away.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a system set up to delay, especially bad news. And so when you're studying orchestral trends in 2008, 9, you're finding continuations of bad news. So it'd take a while and so I just found that frustrating. As just, some people really thrive in that type of environment and building consensus. That's not my skill set.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I'll never work in this space again.
So you, of course, get a job at a for-profit institution.
And the next job I get is the only not-for-profit I applied to, which was do something at that point. So I was applying I was applying to grad school. So I was looking at PhD programs at that point. I was looking at pure tech at that point. Mm-hmm. Along the way, I'd started really sort of as an enthusiast developing skills, sort of looking at data at scale. So using, scripting languages or whatever, mm-hmm. Python. Right. So understanding data in ways that, I wasn't necessarily when I got out of grad school.
You were looking at that, or were you actually doing it?
Doing it, but as just, an enthusiast or a hobbyist on the side.
How so? How does one come upon Python as an enthusiast?
Great question. I mean, I think it's I think about so much of my life in data terms. So there's just a lot of things that I'm naturally interested in mm-hmm. that involve large sets of data, from managing my fantasy baseball team to like determining where we should eat tonight based on like a combination of like where we are, the train schedules, Yelp reviews, whatever. Or
so you must analyze is what happens.
Yes, my mind instantly turns to that analytic point of view. So it was just a natural fit. They have a tool set that makes that easier.
Uh-huh. And can you take us further through it? Because there might be some chief, data officers that are listening, but most are not. So give us one level deeper.
Sure. I as an example?
Yeah.
Or,
using Python.
Oh, using Python specifically. So I was polling to evaluate trades for a fantasy baseball team. I would pull schedules and like stats off websites that have it. So scrape all the publicly available information, then build a model that I could pipe that into to see what that would impact potential ranges of win-loss. So I would simulate, the end of the season hundreds of times based on current stats, and then simulate it again if we made this trade to see if it wasn't just like good for me, but bad enough for everyone else so I could actually climb in the rankings.
And how did you fare as far as fantasy baseball is concerned?
I had some injuries. Those can't be predicted. I think I came in second that season.
Wow. I'm shocked that you came in second. I really am.
It's like second out of 8 friends. So
okay. So still good.
Still good. Not where we wanted to be, but it was a building year.
And then, how many years have you been doing? Let's just stay here for a second. How many years have you been doing fantasy baseball?
I've actually had to stop. So you can tell I can get obsessed about things. So
it sounds like it.
Those are some of my last seasons back there. Yeah, so I played all through, middle school, high school, college, out of college, and grad school, and then I probably not played a season in over 5 years.
Okay, so it's been 5 years that
It's
you
been five.
haven't
Yeah,
played.
I've been clean. I have a little mended around my neck or something.
And does it feel? It feels like you were. It feels like what you're saying is you felt like you were addicted.
It Yeah, it functions in some way like an addiction because there's so many. Baseball's, a statistician's dream. There's so
Indeed.
many finite instances. So you would wake up, you check the scores. It'd be lunch, you check the scores. You could tinker with your roster right up until the last second.
Sure.
And the second it's done, you can do it again.
Yeah, tomorrow.
There's
Yeah.
162 games.
So it's too much, basically.
Too much.
You might be better suited for the 16-game NFL schedule as far as fantasy is
Exactly.
concerned. But there's a data guy, Bill James in baseball.
Yes.
How much do you pay attention to what he has done and what he does now?
What he does now, I've probably fallen away from, but I obviously look to him, he's up there on a pedestal for anyone who's in the intersection between baseball and statistics.
Yeah. So he did come up with a whole new language of numbers for baseball.
Yeah.
One that was detailed in the book Moneyball, basically.
Exactly. And if you look at baseball, it's brilliant. And like he was finding value where other people weren't finding value, which gets back to like what's sort of interesting in economics to me. It's finding things other people don't find. So it's the same mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that like I still fall back in that Bill James Moneyball mentality is they just came up with better metrics.
Mm-hmm.
It's like part of my role at Do Something is just coming up with like measuring the right thing so you get the right behavior. Like one of the things they found is when you tell players you want home runs, they swing for the fences, and then you actually score fewer runs because it's the run incentive. So you need something that's better, like, and they came up with OPS, and then there's, iteration on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's this great instance where hospitals in England had the run metrics. So like, what we're going to do as the NHS, we're going to create a incentive where people, we don't want hospitals to kill people. Great goal.
Great goal.
And so they came up with a metric that in essence measured like percentage of people admitted that lived and said, here's what we're going to hold you to. We want this to get better if you're failing at it. And lo and behold, everyone got better. And then they looked at how, and they just quit admitting really sick people.
Oh.
Because there was a problem in the metric.
Pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, exactly. You just wouldn't admit them.
Yeah.
And then if you only have healthy people, they all live.
Everything's great.
Metric goes up. Exactly. So everything matters on the metrics. In the U.S. school system, they used to measure dropouts based on the percentage of people that started their senior year that finished their senior year. Sorry, that was graduation rates.
Okay.
So what schools did in response is they just held people back indefinitely in the 11th grade. So the students that needed the most help would just perpetually be stuck in 11th grade.
So that they couldn't not graduate.
Couldn't not graduate. And then drop out. So they, in essence, force kids to drop out.
Right. And then everything's fine.
And everything's fine from a statistics point of view.
Right. So that brings up this concept, and we'll probably come back to it, that you can make the numbers say whatever you want them to say. So people have that thought. Is that a true thought?
I don't. You can obviously lie with numbers.
Sure.
And like I've heard it said, lies always have an advantage because lies can bend to flatter where the truth can't.
Uh-huh.
So the truth is almost always at a disadvantage, and numbers people buy into. So like you can easily lie with numbers.
Right.
But I don't think that numbers lie. So if you take the other half of that, like sticking with baseball, your data is just all those particular instances you've measured. So like you can take every interaction in baseball and that's your data.
Mm-hmm.
And then where you need someone to come in and add value is to apply a metric on top. Like you can tell people that walks are horrible, and that's a metric you put on top of that interaction, and then they'll change their behavior. So how you decide to value pieces of data is how you change behavior. It's also where you can lie or distort or whatever.
So the data is never wrong. It's always user error.
Or intention.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, intended error or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can lie with numbers, but numbers can't lie necessarily themselves.
Yeah,
is the point of view. All right, I dig it. I can dig it. So you get to do something. They're the only not-for-profit that you apply to. They bring you in. You have great interviews, I would imagine. Who did you sit down with?
So at that point, the organization was under 20 people. For lack of like knowing it specifically, I think it was a 15-person organization.
Sure.
So you saw it and you're like, this is a rocket ship sitting on a launch pad. They had hired one other data person a couple months before I joined. So we're the They weren't looking at their data. So you have, again, virgin data, something that appeals to me.
Mm-hmm.
You also have data in an area that typically doesn't get attention. You have orchestra data, typically doesn't get attention.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm starting to see a pattern. This data interests me because typically people aren't looking at youth volunteering, youth civic engagement. It's just, most people that are solving data are trying to get you to buy like another item online. That's where we've put all our best data mines.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just an area no one's looking at. So that appealed to me.
How many users were there at the time?
So at that point, as members, we were
Excuse me, members.
100,000.
Okay.
And the organization had been in existence for, it had been in a membership model for a couple of years, but been in existence for 18 years.
18 years
or so, yeah.
Oh, so I did not know that there's that much history.
Do Something was started by Andrew Shue, which is a name that even predates my pop culture knowledge, back in the 90s. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but they had no data and they had no members, basically.
And they just made this pivot to a membership model, and they were like, we need data people. So I was data person number 2 after Bob Philbin there.
Okay. And so here's the 100,000 members. What did you notice immediately? And what was the first thing you did?
So the first task I was given, they asked me, how did we do last year? Which was sort of the speed at which they were learning things.
Last year, not yesterday.
Not yesterday. It was, how did we do last year?
How did we do this morning?
So it's sort of this data archaeology,
right?
To keep putting words after the word data and coining them. So we had data archaeology here, where we're digging through. And what I discovered is you had different teams, obviously recording almost the same thing in different ways if they recorded at all.
Right.
So it's a really hard question to answer. So I came up with about as best answers I could based on things that were available. And that led to process changes. Okay, everyone needs to start calling a spade a spade. Everything needs to store them in the same ways. You can't just have an Excel file sitting on your machine. So like a lot of process changes. And then we started coming up with metrics. So also at this point, we didn't put that value layer. We didn't say walks are good or bad yet. We just had data.
We just had the walks.
Exactly.
We didn't even know what they meant.
Exactly. So we had some idea that we wanted more members. So we had that definition, but we didn't know what things to value. So very early on, one of our biggest social media wins is we put a video out around a campaign to donate used sports equipment. We partnered with YouTube stars Smosh.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right now they're going gangbusters. Back then they were a little less known, which is how we could get to them. And it was amazing. They did a video for us and they got 2.5 million, like 2 million views or something overnight.
Overnight
or something, in a day or two. So
whatever, right.
They popped the champagne, best video we've ever had.
Sure.
Then we looked at how they came to the site because you actually start tracking, and we got 60,000 people to the site. Okay, conversion from video is hard. 60,000 is good.
Okay.
Then we followed. 6 of them actually signed up for the interaction, and then you follow those 6 people, and 0 of them actually donated an item, like 0 items of sports equipment. But the metric we had given everyone to work around was like, let's see how many views we can get.
Exactly.
And so they built a video that was really, really, really funny and really, really, really shareable. It was a lot of ball jokes.
Sure.
And that's great when you're dealing with the youth. So, we won. We hit the metric that we put on this. We failed because that metric didn't matter to us when we sat down and looked in the mirror. Like we care about getting young people to take social action. We want the biggest number of young people having the biggest possible impact, not having a laugh.
Yeah, and then what was the next kind of action from you?
So, we analyzed that instance a lot of different ways. It ended up being one of these case studies. You could really find a lot of meat on the bone there. So we restructured. One, it was a lot of just user mapping, watching how these people went through, why they fell off, talking to them. But from a metrics point of view, we wanted to start the teams when they're thinking of the creative of what can you say to people at the very first interaction that will lead to them actually doing the thing we want at the very end. So actually donating sports equipment. So I care less if the video gets 1 million views or 10 million views. I want to reach that largest number of people that we actually can do the thing.
Right.
So view counts might go down. We don't care. What I want you to do is reach every single person and be engaged. So restructuring metrics and how people think that way. And it was also just a culture change. We wanted people to start asking the question, what does the data say? Before that, you're just listening to intuition, and intuition's good until it's not. And this was a situation when it was not.
So that's how many years ago were those first kind of
3.5, 4.
All right, so 3.5 years ago. So kind of 6 months go by, and then for the past 3 years, if people are taking the data more seriously at Do Something, which they certainly are. How has the organization evolved beyond the numbers that you mentioned earlier?
So, I mean, if you talk about that reporting time, the first task, how did we do last year? Now we know how we did last minute, 15 minutes ago. So like we've taken all those things and we're measuring them, not real time, but as close to real time as we need them. So we can actually, it's useful data. We learn something at the same speed we need to decide things, and that's really helpful. So that's one big change sort of from that side. And then the using data, we went from offering 20 different types of programming. So we're a membership organization. We also had in-school clubs. We had a print magazine. We used to write jokes. We used to do all sorts of things. And we found the one thing we're good at, which is running these campaigns. So we went from 20 things to one thing, but then we're used to do 12 of them a year. Now we do 250 a year.
Right.
So we found what we're good at.
And completely changed the entire organization.
Completely changed. Now we're 60 people, have spawned 2 other organizations,
et cetera, et cetera.
et cetera, et cetera.
All right. So then taking that base of 13 to 25-year-olds who you engage with consistently, 250 different ways in a nearly real-time way, let's talk about cannabis, right?
Let's.
All right. So is that something that you guys even care about at all? Because you guys are more, you want folks to do something. So it's more based on, that. When does cannabis come up, if ever?
We care about anything young people care about. Okay. So obviously something we care about to the extent that young people care about it. And then the benefit of sitting on top of 4 million engaged members is that you can ask them things and learn things. So we learned some things implicitly. What are they searching for on site? We've seen this year mental health is way up. So we know mental health issues up just by revealed data. But we also survey once or twice a year on issues that we might not pick up on in the data.
Okay.
And so one of the issues we put in the most recent survey is their opinion on marijuana legalization and whether it should be regulated like alcohol is.
Okay. And so we've talked to other guests about how they passed the law was exactly that same question. It should be treated as alcohol because if anything, it's safer. And that's what the data says to us. No one has ever died, documented death over cannabis use, whereas that is extremely, the opposite in terms of alcohol. So they asked the same question of the voters, adult 18-year-old and over voters, when legalizing cannabis. What did you find from 13 to 25-year-olds?
So I should caveat, we've built a panel of them that are civically engaged 13 to 25-year-olds, and they're very, very similar to all 13 to 25-year-olds in most ways, and then differ in a couple. So they're more likely to volunteer, probably why we have them in our network,
Sure.
And they're more likely to carry on the college. Those are the main ways they're different. So, and you can read whatever biases you want into that. That's as far as the data will let us sort of judge it. So with that caveat, we found, and I'm pulling up a paper so I won't misquote myself, that across the board, the question, marijuana should be legal or regulated similar to alcohol. 31% of all 13 to 25-year-old civically engaged young people agree with that. So only 31% agree. You have 46% disagree, and then 24% they had no opinion.
Okay, so forgetting about the folks that have no opinion, because if they don't care, we don't care. 31% versus 46%, these are not the same numbers that we get from national polling of adults at all. It's 70-30, 80-20, some polls say. Was that interesting to you to find?
This is one of those situations where my intuition would have been dead wrong. We put the question on there hoping to find that young people were on the right side of history or whatever on this issue, and like it was the old folks lagging behind. That was 100% what I expected to find.
Yeah.
And we put a range of sort of hot button issues on there, and in most times we found that, more likely to believe that climate change is man-made. Something like 90% of young people want background checks on all firearm purposes. So by and large, they have a progressive view on hot button issues.
Indeed. And just further to the gun issue, you said mental health. I would imagine that those are correlated, the interest in mental health with the rise in, gun.
Absolutely. And that was one of the other findings. There was only 36% of young people think their schools are providing adequate mental health services.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a huge disconnect. So they think we need more regulation on firearms, and they think the schools themselves are failing to serve this important need.
All right. So they're right on, or I don't want to, that's what they're thinking in terms of gun safety. And you, what about Well, what about abortion and things like that? What are their general
So
senses?
we did not have an abortion question
Okay.
this time, but issues on marriage equality, overwhelming majority in favor, and all like as a national issue.
Okay.
We asked them if race is still an issue in the United States. 88% agreed.
That it is an issue.
Is an issue,
Right.
yeah. Which,
Okay.
of course,
Uh-huh.
pay attention to
Sure.
the news. Yeah,
Exactly.
major issue. We asked them if they trust the police in their community. Only half trust the police in their community.
We spoke with Congressman Dana Rohrabacher,
Okay.
who brought up the point that, at least in the West, they used to call police officers peacekeepers, and now they are called law enforcement. And with that has come a change in the way that they serve the public. So that might have something to do with that statistic. Yeah. It's interesting.
It is.
All right. So 31%. What else happened here? What else did you come across as far as the group that you surveyed?
So I mean, we dug into this. It was one of the ones that really stuck out to me as the thing I didn't expect to see. This was the thing I didn't expect to see. So after checking to make sure you didn't measure it wrong, checking the wording of the question, we started digging in, and it holds across almost every way you can cut the data. 30% of young men agree, 32% of young women agree. So it's not a gender split. We looked at it across their family financial situation. And, for people who think their families are below average, it's 34%. For well off, it's 35%. No difference there. We looked at it across race. Very little difference there. 35% of young white people agree. 32% of young black people agree. So it's not a racial thing. The only trend we saw was from high school to university. So high school age kids, 25% agree. You get to college, 34% agree.
Aha.
So that is the one place where you see this trend sort of change at all.
And one would imagine that there's simply more cannabis use in college.
If my memory serves me correct.
Exactly. So, all right. So that's what we have. We also have the added piece of information that teen use of cannabis is down. And you even mentioned in Colorado specifically.
In Colorado, yeah, they legalize marijuana in Colorado. Everyone's worried that it's going to be, henny penny, the sky's falling. Young people are using way more. And lo and behold, like the rest of the nation, young person usage of cannabis continued to fall. It's a 3-year trend. It went from 25% of young people using marijuana in the previous 30 days down to 20% over 3 years, including this most recent year in that trend in Colorado. And it's a national trend over the last 2 years.
And I would imagine you didn't ask about cannabis as medicine.
We did not.
Okay. And do you have any at least anecdotal information about, that strain of information, no pun intended?
No anecdotal, but before I came in, I looked at the data over the last 20 years for teen usage of marijuana. And you have the early 90s, it rises.
Sure.
Starting in the 90s, young people discover marijuana, teens specifically, and the rate goes from 10% to 25%. And that's right when we're spending on the war on drugs. Then the trend sort of dips and just stays flat throughout legalization for medical, throughout states legalizing. It seems to just be operating in its own vacuum. If anything, the war on drugs seemed to have been driving rates up if you're making correlations here.
Well, yeah, and that's what anyone in the industry will tell you is that was just an epic failure in so many different ways, misinformation being one of them, which goes back to the prohibition of cannabis, as they say, and that brings us to the present where now we are legalizing. You are sitting here because you have this information about these, millennials and young people who don't seem to care about cannabis as much as we do.
Yeah, and they don't seem to care about anything fun as much as we do. They've been measuring vice usage for teens going back to 1975, and pretty much every category is at an all-time low. Cigarette usage, don't smoke, but it's down from above 50 to 5% on the 30-day numbers. Alcohol usage, all-time low since they've started measuring. The only thing that's rising is e-cigarettes, and the percents are still very, very low.
Okay, so that's rising, but it's a smaller pocket of data.
Smaller pocket of data.
So, so as far as Vice and what the other information you have about this group of people, why do you think that is?
You hear millennials described as the smartest generation.
Steve D'Angelo, an industry luminary, I call him the id of the industry, himself uses that terminology.
Yeah, and we see this in our interactions across the board. They are incredibly savvy. And when we're crafting content, we are always amazed at the bullshit sensors that young people they can tell when you are trying too hard in a fraction of a second, and they will let you know. And part of it's just the medium that they're consuming information on now. We're in a mobile generation. Everything is being consumed very fast, but they're consuming so much of it. They're all hyper-connected. We ask about news consumption, and almost every single young person's getting news multiple times a day from multiple sources.
So is Vice use down simply because information gathering is up?
I don't know if there's a correlation between the two, but I definitely see this young person generation, their connectivity has made them informed in ways that maybe prior generations weren't.
Simply couldn't have been.
Couldn't have been.
Right. Okay. So then let's get to some advice. Okay. So I've got my, cannabis business. If I'm an ancillary business that provides services to a dispensary or to an infused product manufacturer or to a producer or grower, that's fantastic. Or if I'm one of those other three groups, that's what I do. What kind of information? So you've got retailers and you've got product producers essentially, and then the services that support that industry. What should I be doing about my data right now, Jeff? What should I be doing
as a
CEO of this organization? What should I make sure is happening?
Oh, as yourself, or as
one
CEO,
of those industries? One of those industry executives.
Well, I think, if you're looking at their upside's obviously getting it legal in as many places as soon as possible. So if I was in an organization, I would be trying to generate or use data that sort of mitigates all the external fears, right? So you have data and you're going to use that in like a commerce company and you're going to grow your business, whatever you're going to find, your sales model, do that. But I would also be really focusing on how you win the public opinion war here. Colorado's doing this in a lot of ways. I just saw a news story about how they beat their last year's money they were able to give the schools just this week. So that's a really good news story. Whenever crunch that data, should be getting a gold ribbon from the organization.
Right.
Because and that's the type of wins you need. We also need it around this health concern thing, especially around young people. So and I don't know what data they have available specifically. They should be commissioning polls. It's not incredibly costly to do survey work. They should be looking at that as an opportunity.
State by state and also nationally.
Correct.
This is what they should be interested in besides running their own businesses.
Yeah, they should run their businesses. Data's going to help them there. But they should, that's where I would intuitively turn. Okay.
And if I'm someone that's been in the cannabis industry forever, meaning I'm not coming in from another industry, what's that basic business data information that I should be looking at from a chief data scientist?
You want to start looking at returns on all the things you do. So you're doing a lot of things. You're probably doing a couple of them really, really well. You should continue doing that. So if you have a whole line of products, probably a lot of your profits coming from 20% of them, that 80-20 rule. Again, so you need data to figure out what those 20% are. You can't just watch people buy them. Maybe you can, but you need to figure out what those handful of things you do are really, really well. And then data is going to allow you to figure out what those are, then scale them.
So do drop some product, definitely.
Yeah, you don't.
Almost certainly.
Unless that's your competitive advantage. But almost certainly you're probably selling too many things or trying too many different types of marketing channels or whatever.
And what if I'm a retail establishment?
Great. What are the laws around digital advertising of these products?
You pretty much can't do it.
You can't do it. Well,
you can have a social presence, but you cannot advertise.
Got it. Are all avenues of advertising shut off?
No, but keywords, you're not allowed to do Google keywords at all. You're not allowed to do Facebook keywords, none of that. You can have that social presence, but you cannot, spend those ad dollars.
Interesting. All right. So I'm coming at this from a,
what do you do there,
internet
Jeff?
mindset. Well, I don't know where the laws fall on this, but you would almost want to start building your own mailing list or something either over mobile technology. Clearly, you're going to have higher open rates that way. Email, if that's the, where your technology capabilities are. I don't know if that would count as marketing by sending email messages to people who have already been in the store once, but building loyalty that way.
But do start a loyalty program and then analyze that loyalty program.
I mean, you're going to get way more data. It's an opportunity to not market, but market to these people or whatever the law says.
There you go. We're going to take that as the win right there. So we've got 3 final questions. We have this was very fun to talk about data. So I feel like I'm a convert here, maybe. But the 3 final questions, I'll tell you what they are so that you can think about them at least a little bit. One what has most surprised you in cannabis? And for you, that's going to be a finite amount of time, right? And a finite amount of information. Next is what has most surprised you in life? And the third question that we are now asking, we've just added, which is on the soundtrack of your life, can you name at least one tune? So what had most surprised you in cannabis? I guess looking through this data, there was you said it yourself, I would not have imagined that the percentages would be what they are. What's the next lesson for you? What next most surprised you?
So, I mean, yeah, you hit it on the head. I expected young people to be far more liberal, or even civically engaged young people, because it relates to all their things they care about, the school to prison pipeline, racial equality, all of it's tied into shitty drug laws. So that surprised me.
Right.
But, pulling back and thinking about why, again, I like that sort of why do things work mentality. The thing that surprised me, now I'm a firm believer in, is just broad level legalization in general and how effective it is after seeing. And that surprised me. It wasn't who I was growing up. I wasn't a rabble rouser as a teen. None of this stuff appeals to me all that much one way or another from a consumption point of view, but intellectually and policy wise, I was, very surprised and compelled by the evidence. So you look at, examples like Portugal or whatever, and anytime you do these trials where you remove the regulation, you go to treatment and, personal responsibility models, you get such good results. They're so compelling. So maybe the surprising thing now is why isn't it happening more often?
Legalization.
Yeah.
Believe me, the listener base is right there with you as far as that.
It's surprising it's taken this long.
Indeed. And what they what it's chalked up to is prohibition and reefer madness of, I don't know if you've ever seen that film, all the way back then and through to the war on drugs. There has been a tremendous misinformation campaign about the plant and the applications of the plant. And if you just look into it just a little bit, there is at least evidence that there's the potential that this is a very valuable plant.
Yeah.
And we can't research it, which is something that is very frustrating because it's federally illegal. So there would be evidence if it was legal to research it, which it's not.
Yeah, which is also just mind-boggling.
Indeed. So what has most surprised you in life?
Surprised me in life? I've had time to prepare, and I still don't have a good answer here.
Well, you're married, right?
I am married, yeah. So, it's surprising that happened.
Right.
No,
you don't have kids, though.
I have a 2-year-old.
Oh, you do have a 2-year-old?
I do have a 2-year-old.
All right.
Me and my wife actually had the conversation, and we were going, you know what? We're going to have to figure out how to talk about marijuana as a, regulated substance. Because we just can't imagine it taking 16 years for the work you guys are doing to happen.
Indeed.
Well, that's going to be different than when we were kids.
Absolutely. It most certainly will be different. And what I would imagine is, as we can already see in the data, you said you have a daughter, right?
Yes.
She's not going to care.
No, she just won't care. Yeah, she'll be ambivalent. If anything, it's going to be that thing that like the old people do, and it's just not cool anymore.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or, if, well, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So as far as what's most surprised you in life, the fact that you got married to begin with is, I heard you say that at least in passing.
Yeah, in passing. No, it's just, I guess, one thing that continually surprises me is how when you're doing something, it feels like it's the world, and then you stop doing it, and a week later, you just like the human just adapts. Like how adaptable it is to be a human.
How do you mean?
Oh, even when you're having, when something horrible happens to you, like whether you lose a job, you lose a family member, whatever, it feels like a bad breakup. It feels like the world's ending. It feels like it's the most important thing. You feel the weight of the world, whatever. And a month later, you're mostly back to your even keel. And the other direction as well, something really, really good happens to you. And, you buy that product you've been eyeing for months, years, you save up, whatever. And you're going to go back to wherever neutral is for you. Like you have to take care of neutral, but like how adjustable humans are. And like, you only learn this through experience. And, nobody, you can read studies, you don't pick it up. Like, that surprises me time and time again.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting point. I love your caveat, which is you have to take care of neutral.
Yeah.
So neutral's got to be in a good place to begin with.
Exactly. That seems, but that functions with it. There's different levers you're pulling for that. Like, it doesn't matter what those big external things are for where your neutral is. That's sort of taking care of yourself.
Indeed. All right, and so then the soundtrack of your life. Name at least one track, one tune.
Oh boy. I've been looking at real estate, so I would put LCD Sound Systems, New York, I Love You, but you're bringing me down on there right now.
Because it's true.
It's so true, yeah.
That is part of the data analysis that's happening. Oh my God, you with looking through the house, you're going to find the perfect place for the perfect price. It's just going to take forever, Jeff.
Yeah. My algorithms are out there working right now.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
All right. And so Jeff Bladt, taking us through not only how he has gotten to where he is in terms of data science, data analysis, understanding the value of the data that he's got, but also his philosophy, how he looks at data, and hopefully that might even help you and yours.